Ob/gins of Reddit. What's the most mind-blowing thing a husband or boyfriend has said? Dad is a 30-plus-year ob/gin, now retired. He tells a story of a hyper-religious couple, Muslim, who came in about difficulty getting pregnant. He examined the woman alone and discovered that she was actually a removed accidental slur. Sorry, intersex, male gonads, undistended, no uterus, normal vulva/vagina. Point. The woman was mortified to learn this at 18. She feared her husband would be violent, believing he had been being gay by having sex with her. My dad gave her the option to call the police or ask for help. He and the nurses gave her phone numbers for counseling and offered discretion when talking to the spouse. She declined everything and asked that they tell the husband together. The man was super upset and they eventually left the office both in tears. Dad never saw her again and wonders what happened. Edit. Multiple people are asking the question, how did she not recognize something was wrong when she missed her period for like multiple years? I had asked this question to my dad as well. The answer was that she did experience mild and intermittent menstruation-like symptoms, cramps, bleeding, etc., but they were very far apart and, in hindsight, completely unrelated to actual menstruation. She was from a rural community and never sought medical attention due to, who knows, money, fear, and the fact she was otherwise completely healthy, I presume. I remember him saying that the marriage was arranged, and I'm sure her side of the fam was probably apprehensive about fertility issues. Edit 2. Removed apparent slur. I was unaware that the H word is considered a slur to the intersex community. I did not intend to offend. Forgive my ignorance. I'm a woman who was born in the late 70s. Grew up in a small, largely Catholic town. I was afraid to touch my genitals as a young child. To wipe/wash, etc. Around early puberty, 10 or 11, I didn't understand why they felt that way sometimes. I didn't know what my own genitals looked like, the parts of them, or their functions. I got my first period at 12 years old. I didn't understand it. I knew what a period was, as in there's blood. I didn't know how much, or how little blood, or for how long. As a result, and because young women's cycles can be very weird and irregular, I bled heavily for over a month thinking it was just my period. I eventually passed out and needed a transfusion. Then came my interest in boys and curiosity about sex. Bad, wrong, dirty, it's awful, but you have to do it for your husband. Masturbation was a perversion. I once got caught watching HBO softcore porn, and that was the end of TV and any freedoms I had. I'm 15, nearly 16, and there's a guy. We spent the summer I turned 16 talking and fooling around. I had an idea what sex was, but also, really not really. He was 20. Basically a boy himself, but had some experience. I lost my virginity to him that fall. I felt I finally got something over with. I wasn't dating him, it wasn't special, and I didn't care. The nice thing is, even now, looking back with adult eyes, I was in no way forced, deceived, or coerced by him. I don't see it as a bad experience, nor a particularly good one, but I don't wish it had been different either. Me, knowing nothing, it could have been far worse. He basically had to do everything. I knew nothing of my body or sex. If he hadn't existed, I could see myself being 22 and finding a hole. This story is more common than you realize, I fear. I worked in home health/hospice care for 15 years. I had a patient that had no surviving relatives. He had a really bad lung situation after wildfires had burned in the area for weeks. Basically, he couldn't get the crud out of his lungs due to a weak diaphragm, and he was suffocating. He had been put on a ventilator, but after a few days, he was informed that he had two choices: get a trash tube put in and live with it for life, or pull the vent tube and die. He chose to die. Since he had been living with debilitated health for many years, this choice was not a surprise to anyone who has known him. They would not let him make that choice on his own. They called me to come in and asked me to basically cock block his choice. I politely informed them that I didn't think his cognitive capacity was diminished, and this choice was in line with what I knew he would have wanted. He doctor blinked and said to me critically, "I'm a Christian, and I really don't think that's a choice I would make." I firmly replied that this was his choice and that's the one he's making, and it wouldn't be very Christian of me to take it away from him forcefully. The doctor said, "Do you want me to bring in a pastor?" I replied, "No, I'm his voodoo priestess. I will perform the rites. I'm not a priestess." We did not practice voodoo. This patient and I had very black humor and regularly made jokes about seeing how far we could push the lines on the voodoo priestess thing. The sound of my patient choking on a vent tube trying to laugh hysterically was kind of heartwarming. Point anyway, they pulled the tube. After a few minutes of regular steady breathing, my patient looked at me and said, "Well, that was anticlimactic." I replied, "You want me to blow some glitter out of my ass for you, buddy?" We chuckled together. He lived for almost another year. We would joke that he failed hospice. Not a doctor, but when I was pregnant with my first and only child, my ex-husband was an embarrassment. During the labor and delivery class he was on his phone most of the time, to the point I fell down when I was supposed to be balancing on a ball. When asked how he felt about the baby, he stated, "I'm not making a big deal out of it," shrugged and went back to playing on his phone. The other couples in the class came up to me during the break to ask if I was doing okay, and even the instructor voiced her concern with me privately. I had to have an emergency C-section, and he just fell asleep. The nurse woke him up by screaming at him that I was going into the operating room. He didn't want to hold our son. He didn't want to change diapers. He would scream at our 2-day-old son for crying and get mad at me for not getting up and doing anything. The nurses kicked him out, and 3 of them gave me names for divorce lawyers, one of which I eventually used. Point the kicker, my ex begged me for a kid because all he wanted was to be a dad. I was on the fence on having kids. 2 years before my son was born, he told my mom that he was going to divorce me if we didn't have a child. Point update. Wow, I honestly didn't think this comment would get this much attention. Thank you for the awards and all the nice comments. To answer some questions that I saw before my son, he was an okay husband. When we first met he was amazing, but now that I look back, I could see he just wanted a live-in caretaker. Hindsight is always 20/20. He was a bit addicted to video games, but for the most part we got on decently. The video game addiction just got so much worse after my son was born, and he began prioritizing them over me and our son. Just one of the many reasons I left. Point yes, he still has contact with my son. He pushed for 50/50 custody, so he wouldn't have to pay child support, which he got, and neither of us owed child support. Now my son only sees him on weekends, if that. I'm working with a lawyer to get child support from him. Point my son is great. He started kindergarten last year and is excelling in math and reading. He's been on the honor roll every quarter. He's turning 6 in a few months, and while motherhood is difficult, especially while working full-time, I love him more than anything in this world. He's taught me a lot about myself and brought so much joy to my life. I can't wait till it's safe to go to Disneyland again, because I'm taking him for a week. Not a mind-blowing thing that was said, but still kinda funny. When I was in medical school, I did my OB rotation on the high-risk area. Medical students were generally scared of this area, so I was the only student with an awesome attending and got to do a lot. We called the attending on this service a random thought generator. If he thought of something, he would say or act on it. Point we had one patient that showed up on our service in active labor. She had a very uneventful pregnancy and we couldn't figure out why she was on our service. But, hey, we'll take a normal patient. She arrived with perfect makeup, perfect hair, and she had the perfect epidural, and was in no pain or distress. The attending looked at me and said that I'd be doing this delivery. Okay, I thought. No problem. Then he looked at the father and said, "No, you'll deliver this one." The father got wide-eyed, and the mother started laughing. He's an air traffic controller. I've never seen him panic before. The nurse took him to the sink, gave him a scrub brush, and had him start washing his hands. We turned back to the mom. Okay, push 1, 2, 3.10. Relax. We looked at the dad, and he's still washing that same finger he started with. Okay, that's good enough. A delivery is by no means sterile. Put this and this on. Our attending didn't put women in stirrups, but would instead deliver straight onto the bed. He sat the dad on the bed with him on one side and me on the other side, and the dad delivered his own healthy child. When my sister was doing her residency in the hospital, she'd also have to do shifts in the ER. She told us a story of a patient, a Turkish girl/young woman, who was having pain during the last stages of her pregnancy, like 7 or 8 months Ike. So, proper huge belly, and lots of time already having been pregnant. After the examination, and being cleared of anything serious, she still seemed very worried. So my sister talked a bit about pregnancies, childbirth, raising a family, this was her first, and so on. The girl eventually told her what not done her so tremendously ever, since she had the pregnancy test. She was afraid that the baby wasn't hers. Now it is not uncommon here in Germany for young Turkish girls, or really any Muslim population or recent generation immigrants, to purposely be kept uneducated, being raised behind a veil of ignorance, if you'll allow a political philosophy pun. So it doesn't come as that big of a surprise that sex ed in many of these girls is seriously lacking, as is their belief in the sexual fidelity of their husbands. But it took quite some time for my sister to explain to her, the girl's poor German skills weren't helpful either, that no matter how hypothetically unfaithful her husband was, the baby inside her is hers. I think eventually with a diagram she was successful. I did women's and infant nursing for 10 years. This wasn't the dad, but rather the mom. 1 hour before change of shift, we get a cesarean admit. For this facility protocol we used an injectable opiate in her epidural to control pain. A common side effect is itching. Keep this in mind. Also apologies for the cussing. I'm speaking verbatim. Said patient was being wheeled on her bed to her room and the itches were hitting their peak during this transit. I receive her in the hallway and help wheel her into the room, get her comfortable, and start prepping her chart. Not 2 minutes after I exit her room, commotion starts in there. She's screaming. I run in and assess the situation. Immediately she grabs my hand on the bedside and begs for the itch to stop. She's actively sitting up and oh no, post-op so fast, and scratching her nethers and her ass. Oh my god, help, someone scratch it. The husband finally makes an arrival at this exact moment and says, scratch what honey? Big mistake. I've never seen evil before, but this woman bout came unglued. She looked at him and dead to rights screamed, Mars you dipshit. If you'd have unloaded there we wouldn't be in this mess. Now scratch my ass. We are trained to keep a poker face, but not one person could maintain it. Every single one of us, family/patient caretake, etc. Except the dad died in giggles. Most of us crying from trying desperately to have a modicum of professionalism. Nope, it was 100% gone. Had to excuse myself to grab the 4th Benadryl to send her into non-itchy bliss. Runner-up, I'm also a trained lactation consultant. This means I'm an expert in helping new mothers breastfeed. One couple had an order for my assistance due to poor feeding for baby. I go in and meet them both, educate to what's about to happen, etc. This father is uber excited about his firstborn son. Extremely helpful and just bouncy energy. Well, I needed mom to express some milk for baby by hand and began to demonstrate said technique. I kid you not, dad takes this exact opportunity to jump in and say, do you want me to help? I can get it started going by sucking it out. We do this all the time. Lem help. Q. Mom's death glare. Not a doctor, but a medical assistant who became a nurse outpatient at a doctor office, so I'm just supposed to trust she got her shot when I can't see it with my own 2 eyes. In response to me saying he was not allowed in the room when he came with girlfriend to get birth control shot. We have an overall policy of only patients in the back for this exact sort of reason. It makes us the bad guy in saying no, because it's our fault then and not the patient saying no. Sometimes it sucks for those who have a good relationship who do want the support, but we've seen plenty of bad/abusive/etc. relationships where the patient would not be able to safely tell their partner not to come in, and they can't be honest with us with partner. Their point in patient. Aha, hospital. Women, you're lucky I'm even in the room right now. With my other kid I wasn't even at the hospital during the delivery. In response to the actively pushing mom trying to encourage him over to the bed to be present in the moment. He was sitting in the recliner watching the first 48 while his partner was trying to push. I remember the show distinctly, even because the doctor made a small comment to him too while we were trying to get him to come over about how maybe that wasn't the best show to have playing during a birth. For those unaware, it's a true crime show mostly / always about trying to solve murders. The outpatient one happened in my first week, which is why I think it was so memorable. The inpatient was first or second delivery I saw, again then memorable. Seen plenty of shitty situations since then, but also plenty of happy / supportive moments. 2-point bonus: outpatient are creepy parents of teens. I had a dad yelling at me that he wasn't allowed in the back because she needed to get on birth control because she's just a teen and isn't mature enough to make that sort of decision, meaning what birth control method she wanted. I just stared at him like, you are trying to tell me you don't think she's mature enough to decide what contraception route to use, but is mature enough to be having sex and therefore needing contraception. He wasn't trying to argue she use it for any other reasons. She's supposedly too young to make the choice of what birth control to use, but not too young to make the choice to have sex. My sister is an OBGYN. I've heard some good ones. Girl was in with her 4th baby at 20. My sis tries to politely suggest how 4 babies is a lot, and are they settling down now? Nope. State pays for up to 5 kids. They said they will be back in a few months when she's pregnant again. Another girl didn't know how to pronounce her name. My sis had seen her chart and told me how it was spelled. Sicola. So she was pronouncing it Psychola. After a few minutes she starts screaming how she's mispronouncing her name and it's pronounced Procassia, as if it was spelled Procacia or something. She goes, it's pronounced Procassia, it's French. My sister told me, she said, I'm sorry but your name is Sicola. I took 2 years of French, and in France it's pronounced Sicola. Edit. It's possible my sister just told me how her name should be pronounced, because of French and all that, and I'm remembering it different. She's actually quite a nice person and I believe she would have gone back to the preferred way. Like she told me, no, chick, that's now how to pronounce those letters, but those words might not have been said out loud. And to the first story, I just kept it short, but people are getting offended someone would make a comment about 4 kids at 20. The comment did come from a place of worry. It was only after the inquiry she got the response of how they know the state pays benefits for up to 5 kids, and how this couple is planning to just live on the government. I'm sure the curiosity stopped there. My father got some odd looks for his declaration. See, I told you that you were in labor. See, my older sister was 3 weeks late and had to be induced. So when my mom was pregnant with me, she assumed the due date was a vague guess and carried on with that assumption. They had plans for the weekend after it. She was taking work meetings up until the morning of, etc. Then, on the exact due date, she was having a bath and said ouch. A few ouches later my dad said, honey, are you in labor? And mom insisted that that was impossible. Now, dad has 3 sisters and 13 siblings, and had seen women go into natural labor many times before this. So he was saying stuff like, but you're feeling cramps, spaced roughly the same number of minutes apart, and you're 9 months gone. Don't you think there's a chance you're in labor? And mom just straight up denied it. She didn't think this was labor because, after all, her labor after induction had felt way worse. People told her that the second one could feel different / faster, but she didn't really believe it. This went on for what my dad insists was 2 hours, but which mom will go to her grave swearing was no more than 30 minutes. Finally mom conceded that okay, I can at least shave my legs in case we end up going to the hospital tonight. Readers, they went to the hospital that night. In fact they arrived with her almost fully dilated, and I was born within 90 minutes of their arrival. Dad was one part vindicated and one part ready to have my mother's head examined when the doctor said, gee, I'm surprised you waited this long to come in. I doubt this will be seen, but here's my story. Obligatory, not an OBGYN. When I was 22 I was pregnant with my ex-husband and I's daughter. I had previously suffered through cervical cancer at 19, and after the surgery I was told that it was unlikely I would be unable to conceive. Fast forward to 1 month into our relationship, and I'm so pregnant my test showed positive in seconds instead of the minutes the tests suggest. I never expected to have children, but he wanted nothing more than to be a dad. He was so supportive and is still an amazing father. Unfortunately, about 7 to 8 months into the pregnancy they found cancerous polyps on my cervix. I was told there was nothing we could do that wouldn't immediately jeopardize the pregnancy. I was told that hopefully a natural birth might take care of everything naturally. It did not. I went back a couple weeks after delivery for a checkup and the polyps had grown back. I was given the option to try an experimental new medication that may or may not work, or I can have surgery the same day and be 100% sure I would be cancer free. I have no shame in admitting that, after trying to contact him at work several times, I made the decision for both of us and elected surgery. I was made aware that I would never have children ever again. After suffering severe, almost relationship-ending postpartum depression at the age of 22, I decided this was the best option for all of us. So I had the surgery. When I got home and he arrived back from work, I let him know the decision that had been made. His response was to kick me out of our house because how dare I make that decision for both of us. Because I knew he wanted more children, and how dare I consider my own life above that of our hypothetical potential future children. Nothing in life prepares you for that kind of conversation. I don't know how mind-blowing it is, but I do have a lot of young dads who are only vaguely interested in even being in the delivery room. Current societal trends and medical studies tell us it is the right thing to engage the family, but honestly some people just aren't equipped. One example, I had admitted a pretty sick young woman with preeclampsia a couple of years ago. She was stable, so her husband left to get food and some things from home. A few hours later, when I was called back to the room, patient had progressed rapidly and was ready to deliver. I entered the room and it just reeked of fast food. The husband had gotten enough fast food for 4 people and had eaten it all himself. The room smelled like a fryer. The poor mom was on magnesium sulfate and was NPO, no food or drink, so the smell had just added to her nausea and caused her to vomit over and over. My nurse had asked the husband repeatedly to eat in the waiting room so as not to stimulate his wife's nausea. To no avail. Anyway, as delivery was imminent, we were trying to engage the husband in the childbirth process and to have him provide emotional support to his wife. He was busy trying to hook up a video game system, a PS4, I think, to the hospital's wall-mounted TV. They are not really set up for easy access, as they are flush to the wall. Anyway, husband was sweaty and distracted all the way through the pushing, delivery, repair, and initial bonding time with his newborn. He was constantly muttering to himself about hooking up his game system and essentially ignoring his wife. After about 45 minutes or so, when we were finishing up, he turns to say good job, hon, and then plops down to play some first-person shooter. We had tried to engage and redirect him, but of course our focus was on mom and baby. The young woman was so sweet and excited and just seemed demoralized by her husband's behavior. The nurse said he was like that all night. What a jerk. We had no evidence of abuse or neglect on his part and the couple seemed close otherwise. He just was an unhelpful guy and probably should not have been there. This kind of behavior is not so rare, though. Night shift LD nurse. Our hospital has a no tobacco policy. Visiting hours are 10:08 p. and security has to permit visitors into the building after 8 p.m. So mean old nurses like me have to deliver the news that dads have free will to leave smoke, but won't necessarily be let back in, even though they've been in and out, to smoke all day during visiting hours. Listen, I think the rule is dumb, but so are cigarettes, so whatever. I'm just the messenger. COVID has definitely complicated the visitation policies, and let me tell you, dads say some faked up stuff when they really want a cigarette. Had a patient who was getting an epidural that she was extremely nervous about, and dad not only refused to hold her hand, but said, I gotta get the fuck out of this room. That needle is scary as fuck. Okay, fine, I'd rather you leave the room than pass out. But then, literally as the CRNA was working to get the epidural placed, sterile field set up, giant needle actively in spine, dad from behind the curtain shouts, babe, what is your credit card number? I'm ordering pizza. He then came around the curtain while I'm doing the epidural hug, and he tried to go around to where the CRNA was set up because her wallet was in the closet in that area. I told him to stay back from the sterile table, so my patient then proceeded to tell him her credit card info out loud in a room of strangers while in labor and getting an epidural. And she has been on clear liquids all day, but her asshole fob is asking for her money to order himself a pizza. Same guy also told me that I wasn't allowed to run a urine drug screen on his girlfriend, standard protocol at my hospital, because, and I quote, "we don't do drugs." Dude made me pretty nervous, and while normally it doesn't bother me to tell people about our crappy smoking rules, I had another nurse come in with me after he told me he needed to smoke point then, right before we moved the patient and baby to the postpartum unit after delivery, he got us again. He accused us of sexism because our policy doesn't allow anyone, staff included, to carry babies in the halls. He wanted to carry the baby to their postpartum room. Baby had to either be in the rolling bassinet or carried by mom, or I guess dad, if they cared that much, in a wheelchair. That actually almost got really ugly, but we de-escalated it, thankfully. Alternatively, I've had several patients deliver without their support person because a cigarette takes priority. Side note, if you're a first-time mom, I know you're excited to meet your baby, but don't elect for a non-medically necessary induction prior to 40 weeks, especially if you're only 1 centimeter dilated. Your baby doesn't want to come out yet. You will probably get some sort of cervical ripening that will take up to 12 hours, and you may end up not having your baby till the next day entirely. It sucks, and if your support person smokes, they're gonna get grumpy. I'm in labor for 24 hours. I tried to punch the anesthesiologist. So if he were on Reddit, his story would be I ran out of the room, cause woman in labor, didn't like how I talked to her for the record. Monday 6 AM getting induced. Contractions are couplets so not regular, and they come in on top of each other, and off the charts. Nurse's words to me, not mine. I didn't want to take any pain meds, but I was dilated at 4 hours, not able to rest or sleep cause of these couplets. My ob says I can have an intrathecal. Cue the anesthesiologist. He finally comes strolling in around 6 AM Tuesday, 24 hours of being induced/labor, after my ob gave the orders an hour prior. I sign the waiver and hunch my back for the needle. After I lay back down, the anesthesiologist stays in my room for a while. By this point I'm crying a little cause I'm tired, I'm upset that I took pain meds etc. The nurse is telling my husband how I must have a high tolerance to pain cause the meds should have kicked in. Another 20 some minutes go by, and I'm finally relaxing and feeling a little better. Anesthesiologist comes to my bedside on my left. I'm left-handed, and the 4th ETC pointer's in my left hand. He asks me how I'm feeling, and I tell him I still hurt a lot. He says, well, at least you're not crying anymore. Instinctively, I took a swing with my right hand, but he moved, and I didn't connect. Needless to say he ran out, and I didn't return to my room for the rest of my hospital stay. My husband said he was proud of me. I'm not an ob/GYN, I'm a guy who gave one a good story. I was 18, in college, and I had a weird throat problem, esophageal spasms. Turns out, I went to a doctor on my own for the first time, and had to pick a provider from a list on my parents' insurance. I, 18-year-old dude, did not know what ob/GYN meant, and thought it was just a general doctor. I called to make an appointment, and the receptionist said, you know she's a lady doctor, right? I thought, why does it matter that she's a woman? I've had female doctors before. I insisted that I needed to see her, because she was on my insurance plan. The receptionist hesitated, then made me an appointment point. While waiting in the exam room, I did notice lots of diagrams of lady parts, but I just figured the rooms were themed or something. The doctor was super nice, but she actually opened a medical textbook in front of me to try and figure out my problem, which she did. Fast forward a few years, and my wife is pregnant with our first kid. We walked into the ob/GYN office together, and I stop in the doorway when I see the sign. Suddenly it all clicks. I was some weirdo who insisted on seeing a gynecologist for my throat problem, and didn't notice the waiting room with 100% women, and wasn't made suspicious by all of the vagina pictures. My wife about died laughing when I told her.